here today. We did not think we'd get quite the turnout, and I also want to say thank you to Mike Caffaretta with the Oregon Department of Forestry for being here today, Jennifer Allen, who used to be with the Oregon Parks Commission, for being here today, Roy Fox, and many of the donors who are here tonight, Gavin Mahaley taking photos, who works for the Sambury Trail Foundation, and the members of the Oregon Fly Fishing Club of Oregon, which is also connected to the Fly Fishing Affinity Group here at the University Club. So tonight you're going to get a look at the Sambury Trail, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the trail and a little bit about its current status of the Sambury Trail, and a little bit about the future. And my hope is that by the end of the presentation, for those of you who are not engaged or involved in the Sambury Trail Foundation, that you will find a way to be engaged in the Sambury Trail. Because if there ever was a legacy project for this generation now, this is it for the Sambury, for Oregon. It is, we believe, the Sambury Trail. It's our next big adventure. It is a big idea for Oregon, and Oregon is not a stranger to big ideas. The Sambury Trail really embodies the heart and the spirit of Oregon, connecting us to our past, really connecting us to the future, and connecting us to each other. Congresswoman Susan Bonamici really summed it up well when she talks about how the trail really connects us to visitors. It supports our economy, it connects us to each other, to education, health, and our well-being as human beings and as neighbors and as community members as a part of Oregon. So you probably, maybe some of you were able to look at this map. This is a map of the entirety of the Sambury Trail, which one day will connect the Portland metro area with the Oregon coast. Or if you live on the Oregon coast, you might say, it will connect the Oregon coast to the Portland metro area. And if you're even a bigger thinker, picture thinker, it will connect the Oregon coast to the Dalles of Oregon. So this is 82 miles. The different colors represent different segments of the trail, sort of the big sections of this future trail, which was a railroad, and we are turning it into a trail. It will be a rail to trail. So if you look at the coastline, the yellow segment there, that really takes you from the top of the yellow segment is the Tillamook Creamery, and the bottom of the yellow segment is the Tillamook Air Museum. This section of the trail actually got wiped off due to politics. Now, it's on this map because we believe, as we all know, politics change over the course of time. We're seeing it right now. And so that one day this may become a trail that you can get. And if you haven't been to the Air Museum in Tillamook or the airport in Tillamook, there's actually an incredible park nearby. The Air Museum is very cool. There's historical barracks there as well. And then the blue segment going up the coast, that is what we call the coastal segment. And so that goes through numerous communities on the coast that are not connected except for by 101. And the Sambury Trail will connect these communities together. And then once you get to the top, that sort of little I don't know, it kind of looks like a kidney or something. That's Nehalem Bay up there at the top of the Aqua. That is where the community of Wheeler is. And so from Wheeler up the purple segment, that's what we call the river segment. So this follows the Nehalem River, which is an absolutely astoundingly beautiful section of Oregon that gets very few visitors. And then it goes to the confluence of the Sambury River, which we'll take a little bit of a deeper dive look at tonight. And then through the orange segment, that's what we're calling the canyon segment. Now, the orange segment actually follows part of the Sambury River and then into the Sambury Canyon, which we'll talk about this evening. And then the green segment we call this the valley segment, but it includes part of the Tillamook State Forest and also down into sort of the valley of Washington County, where there's a lot of farmland, a little bit of private forest land. And you can see here Manning, one of the segments we're working on is between Manning and up into Stubbs Stewart State Park, which is just past Buxton, and then it goes down to Banks. Now, what I don't have is we don't have a map of, this is sort of, I feel like this is the heartbeat of Northwest Oregon's recreation economy, and it's not even built yet. But this Salmonberry Trail is going to connect to the Yamhalis Trail, which will go down to the wine country. It will connect, Roy Fox, who is here tonight, has actually ridden some of the logging roads that will take you from the Salmonberry up to Astoria. It connects to the Banks-Vernonia Trail, which will take you into Vernonia and then to the CZ Trail, which will take you down to Scappoose and St. Helens and to the island of Sand Island. So Banks is really your front door to Oregon's Northwest Recreation Area, which we see that in the Columbia Gorge. The Columbia Gorge is really being strangled by overuse, and this Northwest area and the Salmonberry Trail is an antidote to what we're seeing in the Columbia Gorge. Now, in 2024, just want to make sure, you know what? I'm on the wrong one, Gavin. So you guys are gonna watch me here because we have lots of presentations. This is my presentation for tomorrow morning to the Tillamook County Commissioners. But I think you're gonna want this presentation.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I am sure. Politicians look for numbers. You're probably not looking for numbers. We got the same map. We've been through the map. Big idea, it's closed to the public. This is really important. So while we do guided hikes and we take people out to the trail, it is closed to the public. Excitingly, we're ready to build, which we're going to tell you about. But first, I want to take us a bit into history. So we are in Multnomah County. And yes, we are in this beautiful building of the University Club. I'm not quite sure when the University Club was founded, but I feel like I heard it's the oldest club in Portland. Is that true? 127 years old, which is actually not a big deal because there were humans here for 6,000 years. And in Multnomah County, there were 7 tribes that lived in this area. Now for the Salmonberry Trail, there are in particular 2 main tribes along the Salmonberry Trail, one of which is the Tillamook, sometimes called the Killamook, and one is the Kalapuya Atfalati. Is that right? Atfalati. Yes, I was trying to practice today, and so it's difficult to try to figure out what to say because almost all of us in this room are white, and we wiped out as our ancestors that wiped out Native Americans. So I chose just to pick a few facts that I found online that I thought were impactful, at least to me personally. So Tillamook Indians was a tribe of about 2,000 that thrived all along the Tillamook coast, and then they would go in about 30 miles up the Nehalem River and into the Salmonberry Canyon. In 1849, it was dwindled down to 200, and in 1990 to 50. And then the Kalapuya, which primarily was a tribe that resided around Washington County, in 1800 had about 1,000 individuals of the tribe, and by the 1850s were 60 to 70. Now, if you're interested in learning more, I'm not going to go into any more details here, but the White Oaks Museum in Hillsboro has a great interactive display that you can go see. Also, the Confederated Tribes, the Grand Ronde, go down there to visit their museum. And in Tillamook County, in the city of Tillamook, there's a Tillamook Pioneer Museum. And so those are some places, and also Forest Grove, so at Pacific University. And I have in here, some of you may have heard about the Indian schools that the federal government managed. Forest Grove actually had the second federally sort of managed Indian schools, which were terrible boarding schools. Now moving forward in history into the early 1900s, there was a gentleman, Lytle. His first name started with an E, and he had this crazy vision. He was a railroad guy, not from Oregon, from elsewhere, who had a crazy vision that, Northwest Oregon had all this timber, and if he could just build a railroad, it would open Northwest Oregon's economy. And so he devised a plan and got some funders, and in 1905 started construction, both in Tillamook, with a crew in Tillamook and a crew out in the Hillsboro area. And these crews were not white United States folks. They were immigrants from all over. And they often had to take their own bedding and their own clothes in to be able to build the trail. And so from the two sides, they began constructing. And there is this book right here, which is an amazing book. You can get it on Amazon. There's not very many left. It's called Punk, Rotten, and Nasty. The railway was called Pacific Navigation Railway, and they nicknamed it Punk, Rotten, and Nasty because this terrain was so challenging at the time. There were thousands of men and some women who worked to be able to build this trail from the Portland area to the coast. It was titled at the time as a Manifest Destiny project because it was so difficult. And then in the 20s and 30s, after the railroad was built, it was built in, I think, 1912. Well, all these towns started popping up, and they were logging towns. And that is why the history of our strong economy in Northwest Oregon was really the punk, rotten, and nasty. And of course, the timber industry was then born in Northwest Oregon. So let's talk about the timber industry. We had a boom early on, and then in the 30s, the Tillamook burn began. And it was a series of burns that happened until, I think, the 1950s. And I'm an Oregonian, but I wasn't really around when this happened. I met with Doug Decker one day in his office. Doug Decker was the state forester in the mid 2010 era. He's also a very big supporter of the Sambury Trail. And when I met with him in his office, he had this photo of him as a kid out like planting trees. That was black and white. And I asked him about that. And he said that he had grown up in Tillamook during the burn, and as a kid, he went out and planted the trees to replant the Tillamook forest. At the time, it was not the Tillamook forest, it was just a forest. And that public service as a child instilled in him the desire to want to serve the public, and he later became our state forester. This fire was so large, it created its own hurricane force winds. It was so large, the sky was blood red all the way to Montana. The plume that was created, basically the mushroom smoke, mushroom-shaped smoke that was created, was so tall, it was taller than Mount Everest by 10,000 feet. And ash on the beach fell in Oregon in some spots as 2 feet high, and it fell across 500 miles, which is as far north as Banff and as far south as Union Square. And then after the fire occurred, it became the Tillamook State Forest, and it created a new economy. And this new economy was replanting the forest and bringing it back to life. Helicopters dropped 1 billion seeds, and what's really fascinating is to see all of these sort of groups of individuals that are very different come together to plant 72 million trees. And this is school children, inmates, and the Conservation Civilian Corps. Yes, sir?
So, I've driven through this and seen the Tillamook burn, but this is suggesting that the fire lasted from 33 to 51. Are you telling me?
No.
No, okay.
No, it did not. It was just a series of fires over that period of time. They call it the Tillamook burn in that period of time. I think there was 6 or 8 fires. Mike, do you?
Every 6 years from 1933 to 1951.
There we go. Every 6 years, there was a different fire that occurred. And really, these fires then also helped rebuild sort of our Northwest economy. Yeah.
It's the largest fires we've ever had, except for the ones we've had recently.
The largest fires in America at a time, I'm not really sure. I can't answer that question. I don't know if you can, Mike. Jeff?
What is the answer? Well, I mean, there were other large fires. That was certainly historic for Oregon. I think 1910 was another series of large fires, and of course we had recently. But for Oregon and for the kind of timber that burned, certainly way up there.
All right.
No.
Oregon Public Broadcasting several years ago did a documentary called The Greening of the Tillamook, narrated by Jerry Pratt. Should be on
The Greening of the Tillamook, which we can send that out to folks afterwards. And what's quite interesting is when you fast forward into the 1970s, the amount of timber that they were taking out of the Tillamook State Forest could actually rebuild every house in America at the time. And roughly 45% of the working population in the state of Oregon in the 1970s, in some way they were connected to the timber industry at the time. So let's fast forward to recently in the 96 and the early 2007. If you were here in Portland in 1996, you may have remembered the flood of Portland. And if, some of us went down with, to try to help move the sandbags. Well, in the Salmonberry Canyon, this is a photo of the Salmonberry Canyon, and the red here represents the very, very steep slopes. It was extremely impactful, the 96 storm and the 2007 storm. Much of this area has a 50% slope. It's a dangerous area to go into if you've fly fished in this area or tried to drive in and there's only really logging roads to get into this area. It's very, very challenging and dangerous. This is a photo of the Pacific Railway Navigation train. This is one of 67 trestles. Total is 72 trestles and bridges. And after the 2007 storm, Ron is here. Ron, you want to raise your hand? This is one of, I think, Ron's photos. Thank you so much. So Ron is an avid expert fly fisherman, and he took these photos in the canyon. It just sort of shows you the damage that Mother Nature can do. She created hurricane force winds. The water that came through the Salmonberry Trail was so strong, it just piled up trees. Boulders came down that were the size of VW buses. Landslides came down, and of course all of this impacted the fish habitat and the water quality and the ecosystems there. I am told, I have not been to this location, but I am told this location, this rail still exists today, and a human did not put that rail in those trees. It was Mother Nature, and she is here to stay. So it's something that we look at and we contend with as we prepare to build this trail. And building a trail is very different than building a railroad. And if you can think what those immigrants did in building this railroad in 6 years, certainly we can build a trail and maintain it. Now, after the 2007 storm, we all have moms, and we kind of know how they are. They can be bullies. There were 2 moms at the Oregon coast. One was married to a dairy farmer, Michelle, and she still lives there today, and she has 3 kids. And the other is Kathy, and she lived in Bay City. And she still lives there today. She's actually a city councilor at Bay City. And after the storm, they had ridden rails to trails in other parts of the country before the storm. And so when the storm hit, they got together and they said, well, this should be a trail. They should not put a railroad through here yet again. They've tried twice with the storms. And so these moms got together a few other moms. This is a mom on the Nehalem River, and they went to the county commission. They used the democratic process, the Tillamook County Commission, and they went to the port of Tillamook Bay, advocating to turn the railroad into a trail. And in fact, in 2017, with the support of the Oregon Department of Forestry, the Oregon Parks Department, Cycle Oregon, and many others, they were able to go to the Federal Surface Transportation Board. They manage the railroads. Some people call them gods. They have more power than the executive office. And they said, yes, you can have a 99-year lease to use this 82 miles as a trail. Now, since 2017, the community as a whole has been trying to figure out how to do this because it's very difficult. There are local laws, state laws, federal laws. It costs a lot of money. Mother Nature has done a lot of damage. There's the ecology and the environment that you have to take care of, as well as neighbors. So we gathered even more supporters to go with us on this journey to building the Salmonberry Trail. And the priorities for our partners are, yes, we want to build trail, so have trail construction so the public can use it. We want to ensure that we protect the environment because there are very, very sensitive habitats along the Salmonberry. We want to support the local economies. There's 12 local communities that live along this trail that are rural and that are struggling. And there's also a statewide economic output that will occur because of the trail. The trail, I call it the trail, but it's really a neighbor. The Salmonberry Trail runs 82 miles next to schools, next to churches, next to businesses, next to fish, and next to flora and birds. So being a good neighbor and part of the community is important to us. There are, I think, almost 100 school districts along this trail. So ensuring that the local schools have an opportunity for outdoor education is also very important. Of course, we all know if you spend time in the outdoors, it lowers your stress level. We all have way too much stress level, and it also is important for your physical health and having responsible recreation. So the Salmonberry Canyon, I know some of you are fly fishermen and fly fisher women and you are interested in the Salmonberry Canyon. This is the area that's really difficult to get to. I was lucky enough to hike in 2 years ago over the course of the summer, and we, on our map, I think it was 16 or 18 miles, railroad miles. So if we had to hike the railroad, that's what it would have been from the Conklin area down to the confluence. But in actuality, my Fitbit told me it was 22 miles because of all the destruction that you had seen. This is also a photo from Ron. Thank you, Ron. One of the many bridges along the Salmonberry Trail. So these are all photos from the Salmonberry area, roughly. There are 10 tunnels in this area, again, built over 100 years ago, 22 miles and 18 bridges. Many of these bridges need to be replaced or fixed, and at a minimum inspected, because they haven't been inspected since the storm likely of 2007. We have inspected a series of bridges in Washington County, but we haven't gone into the canyon to have those inspected, in part because of the cost. In the Salmonberry River, it is, some people, and again, I'm just getting into fly fishing, some people call this, sort of a maven for winter steelhead. Mel?
Is it mostly single track?
The trail is mostly single track, but there are areas, so Mel is asking sort of like, is it one track, 2 tracks? It's mostly single track, but there are areas where there are 2 trucks where they had switchbacks or train stations. So in some most of the single track is 100 feet right away is what we have. But of course, it's double that in where you have 2 tracks, and in some areas where you have an actual trail or what we would call a trailhead today, what was a station at the time would have been maybe 400 or 500 feet. So there are some areas. So in the Salmonberry River, you've got fall and winter Chinook. There are no hatchery fish in this river, which is very rare for Northwest Oregon. It's catch and release December through March. There are many challenges. So this first photo is, you can't really see, but this is a huge log that fell across the right-of-way 2 years ago. And we hired a logger to take it across the right-of-way, and it's now sitting at our future trailhead. But this happens more often than not because of the terrain and the weather. And then you can see, this is actually when I hiked the Salmonberry. This is my brother hiking up a steep slope where the railroad had been washed out. So we were trying to figure out a way around the railroad in the Salmonberry River, and this is a photo of the Salmonberry River. So ensuring that the water quality of the Salmonberry River is protected is critically important, and that means it's shaded. We limit the sediment that goes in so that the temperature remains low and not high. If the temperature is high, it means everything else that touches the ecosystem also begins to wilt and not be healthy. This is a picture of the Salmonberry River, and I just wanted to acknowledge the Native Fish Society. So for those of you who are fishermen, they have a Salmonberry River Stewards Program. These volunteers have been going out and counting the fish and monitoring the water temperature for almost 30 years. So today, what are we doing at the Salmonberry Foundation today? Our current trail projects, we are attempting to build trail in a number of different areas. The city of Rockaway, the Tillamook Creamery, from Banks to Stubbs Stewart State Park in Washington County, which we call the Catalyst Loop, and then in the city of Wheeler, which is a tiny town of 400. During the boom of those black and white photos, it was a town of thousands. Today, the river is almost clear. 100 years ago, it was black and brown of sludge. And so we're working on a demonstration project in the city of Wheeler, and we're investigating a segment from the north part of Bay City, near the Fish Peddler, if you've ever been there to eat on Highway 101, all the way down to Kilch's Point. And Kilch's Point is a beautiful hiking area that the nonprofit, the Tillamook Pioneer Museum manages, so it'll connect up to that trail segment, in which they have a lot of interpretive displays around the Tillamook Indians. This is a map of the Tillamook Creamery. You've probably all been to the big building on the left. This is 101 on that far side. This is Latimer Road, a local county road. This is the rail line. So we want to build roughly a mile of trail, but if we're lucky, and Mike and I are going to go down and investigate this in a week or two, we'll be able to extend the Sambury Trail north and actually connect up with a local street so that there will be a loop. So that is the Tillamook Creamery path. We're about to enter the permitting stages to figure out what permitting we need, because there are things like wetlands, and we can't build in wetlands. And there's about my thumb size, not really, but maybe on this map right here, there's a little wetland that we can't disturb. So we've got to kind of work around that wetland. And then heading north, Bay City doesn't have a line because we're investigating Bay City. But Bay City is a great small community. You can see the pier going out to Tillamook Bay. That's where the white dot is where the Fish Peddler is. Go eat there. They've got great fish and chips. And so our trail will follow, it's on the west of Highway 101, all the way down to this green area here. This is all owned by the Tillamook Pioneer Museum. It's easy, soft trail, just dirt trail, and it goes all the way out to the bay. And there's usually never anyone there, and it's absolutely gorgeous. So we've got parking and bathrooms at the south end. There's some parking already at the north end. There's no big challenges because, as you know, we got a lot of challenges: 10 tunnels, 5 bridges, 67 trestles. But in this area, the only challenge is there's a tiny bit of flood zone. So in that flood zone, we need some land, that's some wetland mitigation land that we can kind of like swap out, just like if you're playing a game. So we're investigating Bay City, but it could be something that we build within a year if we are able to find the funds and the wetlands mitigation. And then the city of Rockaway. So we are supporting the city of Rockaway Beach. If you've been down 101, you know this is a very congested area. The high school is up here on the north end. The trail will go on the west side of Highway 101. At this point, all the way down to the Big Cedar Park. If you haven't been to the Big Cedar Park, it's a great place to go. It's an old growth cedar tree that is now a city park. And so this trail will actually be paved. And in the city of Rockaway, there is no way to get from that South Lake, the neighborhoods around here, to downtown without going on Highway 101. The kids who go to school at the high school, so the high school is actually not just Rockaway. Remember, these are small communities. So kids who live north up in Nehalem or Manzanita, they're bused down to that high school and middle school. Kids who live south in Garibaldi, they're bused up to this high school. If they're on the cross-country team, do you know where they run? They run on Highway 101 at a 45 to 55 mile an hour speed limit with very little shoulder. So this trail is really important for the local community, and they are funding it with Oregon, ODOT, Oregon PAS grants.
Where's 101?
So 101, so this is the trail, this is 101 right here. And we are literally right next to the trail, and right next to Highway 101. And you have to remember, the railroad was built before there was a highway. There was nothing here. So in the early 1900s, if you wanted to get to Rockaway from Portland before the trail was built, you would either take a train to Astoria and then a stagecoach down to Seaside. And then from Seaside, you would get on a horse, go over Neahkahnie Mountain and down to Tillamook. Or you would go down to Lincoln City and basically do the same thing going north. So in some areas, some of these local communities have actually sort of taken over the right-of-way for their local streets. So there is a lot of neighborly conversations that have to happen to develop this trail, which is why being neighborly and being a community partner is important. And then we get to the city of Wheeler. So much of this land is protected, some of it is private, some of it is public land. This is Wheeler Bay right here. This is the big dot there at the south end, kind of the left side. That is the center of downtown Wheeler, where there's currently a train station. Today, 400 people live here, and again, 100 years ago, it was thousands of people that lived in this area. It's very depressed. There's a great restaurant, the Salmonberry Restaurant. I encourage you to go. It's all local food. It has reopened up, which is great, but there's not. There's also a salmon place that's really good, and there's not a whole lot else. So we are working with the city of Wheeler and some local landowners and the county commission to build roughly a mile of trail that goes north into Botts Marsh. Now, Botts Marsh is a very sensitive area. It's owned by the Community Land Trust, the local Community Land Trust. So it's another kind of local neighbor that we're working to ensure that we do not impact them. Now, that is the phase 1 of Wheeler. Phase 2, I don't have a map of, but it basically goes from here along the highway to this area. So this is one of those railroad sidings. And at one point in time, it actually housed a number of the railroad executives. They had houses right here, and it overlooks the bay. It's absolutely gorgeous. You see eagles and blue herons. It's wide, so it's a beautiful area for folks to be able to walk to, sit on a bench, and look at what Oregon has to offer in terms of its natural resources. Now, what's really exciting, though, is what's next, which is the third phase of the Wheeler project. And so the third phase takes us, the green is kind of the first phase in the downtown Wheeler. And then as you come up, you're going up Highway 101 here, and you can see these little dots that kind of look like a candy cane or something that go that way towards Nehalem. That is the bridge that goes over the Nehalem River. And so it is, and there's a fishing dock down there, but the railroad is the dark red, and it continues going north on Highway 53. And it begins to go through the dairy farms. And it is absolutely gorgeous. It's a highway that doesn't have a whole lot of traffic. And then as it begins to go into the bend, up at the top, you can kind of see this pink thing at the very top above here. That is the Nehalem Bay Winery. So you can stop and get a glass of wine as you continue on around the corner and you get to the Nehalem River. Now at the Nehalem River there, you can see it stops. And it stops because that bridge, again, was built a very long time ago. 90% of its pilings, which are the little things that hold up the bridge, are kaput. So nobody can really go over that bridge at this point in time. It could be $2 million, not quite sure how much it costs. And we know that it would be very expensive to fix. So we talk to our neighbors, because if you're neighborly, you find out new information. And one of our neighbors said, well, hey, did you know there's a dirt road back here? Maybe you could just use that dirt road. So we began to walk that dirt road, which is the blue line. So this is a road that's owned by Tillamook County, and they actually cut it off because of the landslides. And we talked to Tillamook County, and it meets up with Highway 101 down at the end there. And they said, sure, you could use that road if you want to use it as a loop trail. We know bicyclists love loops. Bicyclists spend a lot of money. So this is not only great for the local communities who have their own loop to be physically active and healthy, it's also great for the economy locally. Now the one caveat here is that it drops right here onto Highway 101, and that's kind of a problem because it's fast. So we don't want people to cross Highway 101. So we're hoping we'll be able to raise the money to buy a sliver of land to create a little zigzag trail that goes back to the railroad and underneath Highway 101. Now, the other thing about this segment, and again, this is the important part of being a community member and a neighbor to all of our local neighbors, which includes the city of Nehalem and the city of Manzanita. Now, they're not part of the Salmonberry Trail. The Salmonberry Trail doesn't run to Nehalem or the city of Manzanita, but they would like to connect to the Salmonberry Trail. They go to Wheeler all the time to go to the restaurant or the salmon shop. And so we're talking to ODOT as to how to make that bridge safer for pedestrians and bicyclists. And then also inside the city of Nehalem, there are some private trails that connect to Manzanita, which then connect to the Nehalem Bay State Park. So we asked the question, well, how can we help support connecting Manzanita and Nehalem with the Salmonberry Trail? So we're lifting up all communities and as such, lifting up the state. And then we go all the way over to Washington County. Some of you have been on a portion of this segment. This is Manning to Stubb Stewart, or otherwise called the Catalyst Loop. So this, right now, we are working on permitting and funding for this segment. From the Manning Trailhead, if you've been on, this is Highway 26, right here at the pink dot, there is a white old historic Grange Hall that has Salmonberry with a question mark at the top. So there is an existing trailhead for the Banks Vernonia. This blue line is the Banks Vernonia Trail, which has upwards of 300,000 and more tourists and bicyclists and hikers that come along this trail. So we're attempting to build the Salmonberry Trail. These blue dots are trestles or bridges along the many different, there's McKay, there's the Williams Creek, creeks that go along here. And then at the other pink dot, that is the Williams Creek Trailhead. So last year we were able to take up the rails and ties for this segment. Now what's interesting is that before we could take up the rails and ties, we had to hire somebody, which cost $100,000 to inspect all those bridges. But what we realized is that the inspectors couldn't actually get to the bridges because since 2007, nobody had taken care of the rail bed. So the blackberries were practically as tall as I was. So we had to get volunteers. Melissa and Mike are here who helped with that. Mel and Jack and Gordon helped with that. And so, so we removed the blackberries. The inspectors came in. They said, hey, these are safe for you to be able to take up the rails and ties and utilize for bicyclists and pedestrians. So now we're in the process of being able to go through the permitting process for Washington County in 2025, and then in 2026, we'll build this, open it at the end of 2026 or in early 2027. And then you can see it goes all the way up to the Williams Creek Trestle. David has been up to the Williams Creek Trestle. And then there's this orange little line up there. That is Stubb Stewart State Park. So what's really cool about this is that it connects into Stubb Stewart State Park, which creates multiple loops for bicyclists, which we know is good for the economy. It also, this trail will be utilized by equestrians, by hikers, by the local school districts there, and of course, not by fishermen. But there are fish in the Williams Creek. So Mike Dennis is here, who's on our board. Thank you, Mike, for joining us. And last winter, when he hiked this area with another board member, they saw a series of, was it coho underneath the trestle?
I would probably have to ask the wisdom of the spirit to tell us how much we thought they were big.
They were big, and it was cool. And it was cool. And as you can see here, this is a very different environment than in the canyon because this is all farmland. So we have to have relationships with our local neighbors. Are they doing spraying? Are they crossing the trail? If they're crossing the trail, do we need to assign? We need to educate the folks eventually who are using the trail that, hey, our neighbors might be crossing this with a tractor. Do not flip them off. They deserve to be here just as much as you do. What are some of the things that we're doing right now? So Olin is here. Olin, thank you for coming. He is a volunteer and intern and my godson. And you met David a long time ago, two of you. We're working on this new trailhead at Williams Creek. We have, I don't know what happened. Time's up. I guess time's is up, yes. It is probably true. But we have a lot of different volunteer projects. So at the Salmonberry Trail, we are 3 staff members. So we are small, which means it's 82 miles. There's neighbor relations. There is government relations. This year is the first year we're asking the state legislature for help. So the state legislature, under Kate Brown, actually said to the agencies, state parks and Department of Forestry, you need to go figure out how to fund, build, and maintain this trail. That was a long time ago, and the trail has not yet been built. So this year, we're asking all of you and others to join us in asking the state legislature to invest in Oregon's 21st Century Legacy Project and put $8 million into funding the Salmonberry Trail, the construction and the permitting. The funds don't come to the foundation. They go directly to the construction project so that we can build Wheeler, we can build Rockaway, we can hopefully build Bay City and build the segment in Washington County. And if we have enough volunteers and public-private partnerships that we develop, because this is an Oregon project, so we do not want to hire companies from out of state to do this work. We really want to be able to engage in our local companies to be able to help make the Salmonberry Trail a reality, and we'll be able to hopefully also build Washington County and maybe some of the Salmonberry segment or around the timber area. I'm not quite sure if it's going to come back in. Oh, yeah.
In the salt marshes before going out into the open ocean.
So this is Wheeler.
Slow water provides
This is Botts Marsh. And Race works for the Tualatin, the Tillamook Estuary Partnership Project. And he's talking about that north end of Botts Marsh. It's very, the mud is super thick. It's almost like a bog. And how the mud actually makes it healthy for the plants and the animals that come through, and also does carbon sequestration. So this is some of what we do in terms of guided hikes and education. This is all in Tillamook County. And then these are some of the hikes in Washington County. This right here is Congresswoman Bonamici and County Commissioner Jerry Willey from Washington County, Mike from the Oregon Department of Forestry. And then we also connect with local communities. I've talked a little bit about that, but I'll just give you one more example, which I think is an important example as a human, as an Oregonian, and just simply as a neighbor. So last year, in Washington County, in Banks, which is also a very small community. So they have public employers, and then they have the largest private employer, which is not a tiny business that has a couple employees. It was a timber mill, a lumber mill, the Banks Hampton Lumber Mill. And they made the decision to close the mill. So closing that mill, a large amount of the families lost their jobs. Upwards of 57, I think, 55 families lost their jobs. And when that happened, as a neighbor, we said, well, this has happened to our neighbor, so how can we help? We had no idea how we could help. But we asked. We called Hampton, we called the mayor, and we called some of our local community members, and we just asked, hey, is there anything that we can do? We're building a trail, but we are a neighbor. And in doing that, we found out that the elementary school there in Banks had a 32% food insufficient population. And they have a backpack food program where they put food in the backpacks for these kids every Friday, and they get to take home food so that they are not hungry over the weekends. And that they were looking at shutting that down because they didn't have enough support in their own local community, and on top of the fact that the mill had closed. So we became a good neighbor, and we said, well, we'll make sure to invest in this school food program. We'll ask our volunteers to invest in us, and we in turn will invest in the school food program. So that is how we try to be a good neighbor in our community, which spans 82 miles of very different people across that region. We also love history. So this is really fascinating right here. This is behind those trees is the Nehalem River, and that marker, which Mike Caffaretta told me about, which is how I find it, and we had to go through blackberries to find it. It is a marker commemorating the Civilian Conservation Corps. OPB has an amazing documentary about the Civilian Conservation Corps here in Oregon, which built a lot of the infrastructure in Tillamook County, and of course had a huge hand in fighting the fires and then replanting the forest. And this, we hope, will be a future trailhead for the Salmonberry Trail along the Nehalem River. We educate legislators. So legislators are down in Salem fighting the fight, and they are fighting the fight of whatever's right in front of them. So if we are not in front of them, they are not thinking about legacy projects. They are not thinking about how trails or parks impact people's everyday lives. So it is important for us that we have a presence in the state legislature and with our federal delegation. It's also important for us that you are all also active in some way in educating your state legislators, because being a constituent is power in our democracy. And if we have folks talking to the state legislators, then we are more likely to be able to have an investment of funds, which will open up a trail not only for us, not only for tourists coming over internationally, but for the kids who live nearby the trails and the businesses that will open. We have a lobby day this year down in Salem on March 10th. You're all welcome to join. We'll be sure to send everybody some information about that. And then, of course, we celebrate Oregon, because the Salmonberry Trail is a part of the spirit and the heart of Oregon. We love Oregon, and this is something that we can leave to the next generation. You know, I'm hoping that Olin maybe will have kids one day, and that his kids are going to hike this trail just like I hiked the Oregon Coast Trail with my dad. And my dad and I did not do that much to preserve the Oregon coast beaches, but somebody else did, and we benefited from. It's the same with the Salmonberry Trail. We build relationships. These are some of our local relationships at the Oregon coast. And in 2025, we have a lot of fun. That's the focus. We do have fun no matter what we're doing. This is one of the trestles. We're taking a short guided hike over, which we don't normally do. You have to really sign your life away for that. So Aria is one of our supporters, and we share her quote all the time. And really we do, because it embodies why we do this work on a day-to-day basis, whether you're a board member of the Salmonberry Trail, a volunteer, a donor, or a staff member. And then, of course, there's lots of ways to get involved. If you want to get dirty, Olin can tell you all about that. We are planting some new trees. We are pulling blackberries. We are finding cars underneath the blackberries. We do have happy hours if you like to have a cocktail. They roam around, and we are happy to go anywhere we're asked to go for presentations or to do a happy hour with a community partner. On March 8th, we're doing a series of hikes on that Saturday of the Learning Mile, which is out there in Washington County. And then, of course, we have the Advocacy Day. And then we're at the North Coast Tourism something summit. Can't remember the rest. Happy to answer any questions, and thank you so much for listening for this long period of time. Really appreciate you guys. Appreciate you all. And there's books up here if you want to look at some books and some materials on the tables.
Question.
Yeah.
That's
Wheeler.
Mayor Ted Wheeler's family.
It is.
Has the Wheeler Foundation donated money?
No.
Which is
No, the Wheeler Foundation has not. They have an OCF advised fund, and they did make a contribution. But we're working on the Wheeler. If anybody knows Ted, please introduce us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions? Feel free to ask.
I mean, I have a question. You talk a lot about community partnerships and stuff with businesses and neighbors along the way. It's my understanding that Jetty Fishery, that's been there for 60 years, they're going to lose parking spots because of your 50-foot right-of-way?
Not necessarily. So Jetty Fishery is a challenging area. So as I mentioned, this railroad has been here a long time, and then businesses and families have developed since the railroad. And so at the Jetty Fishery, we actually think that we can add on parking rather than lose parking with the Jetty Fishery. Yeah, and that's the yellow. That's the yellow fishery along Highway 101, just south of Wheeler, and it's a great place to go if you haven't been.
And then
Yeah.
in rural areas, it's a 50-foot right-of-way, right?
It's 100-foot generally. It's 50 on either side from the center.
And then in urban areas, it's only 30. Why do you need 50 on either side?
It's not necessary. It changes. It is different all along the way. So there's not a standard of, in rural areas it's 100-foot, and in urban areas it's less. It really just depends on the milepost to milepost, because remember, when they built the railroad, there was nothing here. Yes, sir?
It's been a while since I've been to Rockaway, but isn't there still operating rail line there, sort of a tourist?
There is. That is the Oregon Coast Scenic Rail.
Still stay there? Or
It will stay there. So the Oregon Coast Scenic Railway sort of came into fruition after the 2007 storm. It's a tourist railway. You can catch it in Garibaldi and ride it up to Rockaway. And then in the fall, they go up to Wheeler. Now, they used to go all the way up the canyon, up to Enright along the Salmonberry River. And the railway this is one of our neighbors. That's kind of a difficult relationship because while we all want to maintain the railroad, we need to have the trail. They need to have the railway. Now, when you get up to the Salmonberry Canyon, now people have different viewpoints on whether or not there should be a railroad going up the Nehalem River and the Salmonberry River. And one of our core principles, as you saw, was the environment and protecting the environment. Because the fish and the trees and the plants and the water quality, that is one of our neighbors. So with the Oregon Coast Scenic Railway, at this point in time, they're in the middle of lease negotiations. It looks like that they'll have a long-term lease, basically where their money is. And their money is between Rockaway and Garibaldi, a couple of expeditions to Wheeler. It is questionable whether they'll go from Wheeler up the Nehalem River to the confluence, which is right about here, or if they'll stop maybe around Moeller or around Wheeler. We don't really know that. If you have an opinion on that, I would encourage you to send an email to the Port of Tillamook Bay because it is the port that owns the land. They own the railway. So they get to negotiate the leases with all the individuals that have leases on the right-of-way. The train has the lease right now all the way up to the confluence.
Is there room for both, the trail and the railway?
It will be very, very difficult, and there's areas where there's not room for both. So up the Nehalem River, I don't have any of the photos, but it is spectacular off of Foss Road. There's this rock cliff on one side, and the rock cliff, hanging off the rock cliff are all these different plants, and mosses, and then they drip in the spring and the fall with water. It's something right out of a movie. And then if you turn to the right side, you've got this rushing Nehalem River, and there's not enough room in that section to have both a train and a trail. So that now you could make people stop, and wait for the train to go by. But that's challenging. And there's also some concern about the health of the river. Yeah. Yes, Gordon.
Well, and one more
Thank
thing
you.
about coexisting with the scenic railroad. It's not running every hour of every day. This is, so, part of the partnership that Caroline has been talking about, how do we manage that? I don't know if any of you are cyclists, but there's a great trail back east, the Great Allegheny Passage. And that is another rail trail. A portion of that is right along the railroad, an excursion railroad that comes out of Cumberland, Maryland. It's possible to make this work. It is going to take coordination and education, and we're a long way from getting to that point.
Yeah.
Would that be our biggest problem today?
Yeah. Thank you, Gord. And we will be building, so we're building this segment by segment versus the entire thing. And I just want to leave you all with, again, a bit of gratitude for spending your evening with us learning about the Salmonberry Trail. And then I'll get to you, Bill. I just want to make sure. And please, if you have the inclination to sign up on our website, we'll send an email to everybody who has come asking you to join us on March 10th or to talk to Olin about signing up to volunteer or for the newsletter and to consider contributing. So we are a nonprofit. Most of our money comes from individuals, not foundations, and not the government. So every contribution makes a difference, and thank you so much. All right, Mel.
Do you have cost estimates to show us for those segments?
So I don't have them for the exact statements. I'm happy to talk to you afterwards. Roughly, we're estimating it's roughly $1 million a mile. But it really depends on whether or not you've got some tunnels, you've got washouts, you've got trestles that need to be repaired. So the Wheeler segment is likely to be very inexpensive. There's none of that. There's no wetland issues. The segment down in Washington County, where we have 7 trestles that we have to deck and put railings on, which we're looking for local steel companies to help us with. And we found one, but of course then politics comes into play. You know, it's just like life in a family. Things change, and you have to adapt. And so now the steel prices are going up. So does that mean that we change what we put on the trestles? I don't know. Or do we not repair the trestles and build a smaller type of footbridge? That could be a possibility. But all these things sort of come into play. And then how does that impact our neighbors, whether they're fish or farmers or local businesses, and the users? Because we want it to be a good experience for our users, whether you're a horse, you know, a hiker or a bicyclist or a fisherman or a hunter even. Yeah, and I'll be around if folks have questions. And thank you so much for having us. Thank you, University Club, Mike, and the Affinity Group for having us here. Yeah. Yeah.
Great job. Hope everybody enjoyed it. And some of you are members of the University Club. Congratulations. And for our field, some of you probably should, if you're interested, let me know. It's a great place to be. The Fly Fishing Affinity Group will do more programs like this. We'll actually have real fishing classes pretty soon, casting classes, when the weather gets nicer. But part of our affinity group is conservation, and what are people doing to protect the rivers, like Carolyn's group. So we do a little broad, you know, and most of our fish is all catch and release. So you know, we love to protect the fish and protect our. We live in a great state. Don't mess it up too much. So you know, take care, everybody.